So before we start, I just want to say I really love StarCraft. It is one of the most important things that's ever happened to me. StarCraft is a game that kind of taught me how to improve myself and how much self-improvement matters to me as a person. It's a game that I spent so many hours playing when I was in high school. I would practice build orders, I would watch my own replays, I would watch pro replays, and I would kind of build up my ability in StarCraft, and I would see the results of my labor in game. And being exposed to that feedback loop of playing a whole lot, studying a whole lot, and seeing myself get better has informed how I approach life since then. That's how I approached school and how I got my grades to be good. That's how I approached something like coding and basically taught myself how to code. So StarCraft matters to me. I really love this game. However, it would be remiss of me to let my nostalgia and love for the game blind me to the fact that it's kind of dead. And I know that if you're a StarCraft player, you really don't like hearing that, but I think it's time that we shatter this collective denial that the community has been in. This game is over. Nobody starts playing StarCraft in 2023. The viewership is not going to go up. The game is flat. It's stagnant. And yes, it's going to have its core community of people who will play it until the end of time, but even if you have 100,000 players who are all still devoted to the game, that's not the same as becoming the esport that it was supposed to be. It's not like a League of Legends where you have these massive tournaments and these massive sponsorships. There's no room for StarCraft to grow in the same way that a game like League of Legends can, or a game like Overwatch can. Blizzard's not willing to put in the investment, and also the game as it exists just doesn't allow for that much growth. And I'm going to talk about why that is today. My name is Autumn Chu, and StarCraft is dead and there's no bringing it back. So there's a core aspect of StarCraft that I'm going to build the rest of this argument around, which is basically that StarCraft is a system that has many interlocking parts that all affect each other in different ways. To contrast this, I'm going to talk about League of Legends for a second. League of Legends is a game where you have basically a top lane, a middle lane, and a bottom lane. All three of those lanes more or less function independently of each other. There are interactions between the lanes, you can roam between them and stuff like that, but for the most part, the matchups are pretty isolated, and that's a good thing for League of Legends. It means that you can make changes to a top lane champion and that has no effect on the way the mid lane plays out or the way that the bot lane plays out. Again, I'm oversimplifying this a lot, but for the most part, these matchups take place in isolation. And that means that Riot Games can make adjustments to different aspects of the game without worrying about other stuff. So for example, they just made a big change to the jungle. They made it basically harder to steal things from the other side of the map when you're jungling, and they also made it easier to get your life back when you're jungling. And both of these things make the jungling experience better for new players. And that's great if you're a jungle main or if you want to get into jungling, but if I'm playing, say, a bot lane, if I'm an ADC, I kind of don't care that much about that change. It doesn't really affect how I play the game, and that's good. It means that they can make these iterative adjustments to the game without changing the fundamental aspects that make it what it is. That's not really the case with StarCraft, I don't think, and that's because the pieces of the game interlock in such fine and detailed ways that you can't isolate one aspect of it and make a change to that without breaking just everything else. So, as an example, I have for you a little diagram over here in Krita, and I'm going to use little shapes to make my point. I play a race called Zerg in StarCraft, and Zerg has two important units, the Baneling and the Zergling. Obviously there's more units, but that's what I'm going to focus on today. The Zergling is pretty much like the first unit that you build in the game as Zerg. Basically, it's a little bug critter that runs really fast and deals pretty high damage, but it's very fragile. It dies very quickly to everything. So it's good for quickly scouting and getting around the map, but because they're so fragile, you can't really just send them as a frontline unit unless you're sacrificing them for something. Basically, there's something you can build a whole lot of early on to try to do an early attack, but they tend to fall off a little bit as the game progresses, or at the very least, their role changes as the game progresses. The Baneling is a really interesting unit. It evolves from the Zergling, and it has a special attack that deals tons and tons of damage. However, it explodes on impact. It's like a suicide bomber in a unit. The Baneling is so cool because it's a really strong response to early units like the Zergling. So all three races in StarCraft have some version of an early game unit that you can build a whole lot of, but that's kind of on the weak side. Zerg has the Zergling, Tyrant has the Marines, and Protoss has the Zealot, and the Baneling does really well against each of these three units. So if you're a Zerg player and you build a whole bunch of Zerglings to try to attack me, I can build a bunch of Banelings and get some really cost-efficient trades, because the Banelings trade really well against Zerglings. One Baneling exploding kills one Zergling, but because the Baneling explodes in an area, I can take out 5 to 10 Zerglings with one Baneling and get really efficient value out of that. The same thing can be said of a unit called the Marine. So Marines are kind of similar to Zerglings. They're cheap, it's easy to build a whole lot of them, and they deal lots of damage, but they're very fragile. And it takes exactly 2 Banelings to kill a Marine, But again, because banelings explode, you can use just 2 banelings to kill a whole bunch of marines. Although realistically you need more of them because marines are ranged. Doesn't matter. So these are like 2 key unit interactions that I want you to understand as I talk about this next part. Let's say I'm Blizzard and I'm taking a look at the Zerg versus Zerg matchup and I want to make some adjustments to it. So I think that banelings are too efficient. I want to reduce the power of banelings in Zerg versus Zerg. So for example, I might make a change where instead it takes 2 banelings to kill 1 Zergling. That obviously reduces the efficiency of banelings early on. It means that I need to build more banelings for them to get value in the matchup, and it means that early ling pressure is stronger. The thing is, this change doesn't just affect Zerglings and banelings, it affects banelings and every other unit in the game. If you reduce the power of a baneling, that changes how the baneling is used in all the other matchups as well. So in this example, maybe instead of taking 2 banelings to kill a marine, it takes 3 banelings to kill a marine. So that has really big ramifications for Zerg versus Terran as well. Suddenly, your most important tool for fighting against marines has been nerfed really badly, and it's much less efficient to build banelings. This kind of fundamentally breaks the matchup. You don't really have good options for fighting mass marines other than building a whole bunch of banelings, at least not until like very late in the game, when you can get like lurkers or whatever. Basically what I'm saying is that you can't really adjust one unit in the game, like isolate a really particular part of the game like you can in something like League of Legends. Once you make one adjustment to a unit, it has impacts on how that unit interacts with every other unit in the game, and so you can't really make adjustments and innovations and improvements on the game because everything is so interlocked and intertwined. So that's really the fundamental issue with StarCraft, I think. The game is designed in such a way that it's very brittle to changes. You change one thing in one place and it has these deep ramifications for other things somewhere else. So the brittleness of design in StarCraft obviously is bad for the game because you kind of just get the same stuff over and over again because you can't make changes to it. But it's also really bad for StarCraft's monetization model. So I'm going to take a second to talk about the different axes that League has to monetize its game. The first way is champions. League of Legends has about 161 champions, and players have to buy them or grind like an in-game resource for them. And speaking as someone who played a lot of Dota, this model's kind of insulting because in Dota you just get all the heroes for free. But I will admit, there is some amounts of enjoyment in grinding for something. It's kind of like playing an RPG where you like kill the same enemies over and over again and get more experience. I don't like it because it limits your options as a player, but it's kind of fun to grind for champions. Now the thing about champions is that even though there's 161 champions in the game, only 10 of them are actually going to be present at any given point. What this means is that you can add a champion to the game and it doesn't affect every single game of League of Legends that happens after that. It only affects the ones where that champion is picked. And you can argue it affects like the metagame and the bans and the picks and stuff like that. Fuck all of that. It kind of doesn't matter because in StarCraft, every unit is accessible every game. So if Blizzard adds a new Zerg unit, I get to build that unit in every single game. And even if I choose not to build that unit, I can always transition to it later. So my opponent always has to worry about whether or not I'm going to build that unit later on in the game. In League of Legends, I can't pick a champion and then suddenly switch to a different champion later on. I'm stuck with that champion for the whole game. But in StarCraft, I can pivot between strategies really easily. And so if Blizzard adds a unit, they have to think about how that unit impacts every single game of StarCraft that comes thereafter. The other big way that League monetizes is through skins, probably the bigger one by far. Skins are just cosmetics for characters, so if I'm playing Lux, I can play with the default Lux, or I can play Battle Academia Lux, or I can play Empress Lux. And they look really cool and people like collecting them. They're expensive, but it doesn't matter because they don't affect the state of the game. Great fun for everybody. And part of the reason why skins work is because there's so many different champions in the game. So 161 champions, you either buy or grind for all of them, and each of those champions is also a candidate for releasing new skins, so you can easily get like 5 to 10 really nice skins on a champion. Maybe you want to buy 2 or 3 you really like, maybe you want to collect all of them. And so the fact that there are so many champions and it's so easy to add them means that it's very easy to keep making money off of League of Legends. So as we've established, we can't really add new units to StarCraft. In all likelihood, if the unit is strong enough to see play, it's going to fundamentally change the way the game works. And also, units die like really fast in StarCraft. It's very common for a unit to last like less than a second in a fight, and so it feels kind of silly to have a cosmetic for a unit because, well, it's dead now, and I can build more of it, but I might have to transition into something else later. It's not like League of Legends where, like, that's your character, that is you. You don't really get the same kind of attachment to a single unit in StarCraft as you do with one champion in League of Legends. There's not really, like, a personality or identity to it in StarCraft. So not only can you not release new units and new skins repeatedly for StarCraft, you also can't really, like, leverage the existing units and get skins for them because no one cares about individual units enough to spend money to make them look nicer. So StarCraft as a game is really, really hard to monetize. The existing models for monetizing video games just don't really work for it at all. There's nothing that you can offer to a player to create a newer experience for them that's really worthwhile, and therefore no one's going to give you more money for it. And if you're thinking to yourself, the game doesn't need to be monetized for it to be healthy, yes, it does. Where do you think the money comes from to pay league casters, to pay league players, to keep making changes to the game, to make it look nice, to market it and stuff like that? The game needs money if it's going to grow. If StarCraft can't make money, it can't grow. And so, for these reasons, not only is StarCraft not as popular as current esports, I think it never really can be. The bones of the game, the DNA of the game, are just not set up for innovation, for growth, for new stuff to happen, and for the game to make money. It's a relic of an older time when you just released a game once and the amount of money you got was pretty much based on that first passive players who bought it. Now games are a lot different. Games are continually changing and evolving and growing, and to match that you need a constant revenue stream to go along with it. If you can't do that in 2023, your game's gonna die. And maybe that's okay, you know? Not every game needs to have the staying power of an esport, but the dream for StarCraft was for it to be this big competitive esport that everyone gets around and watches, and I just don't think that future is in the books for StarCraft anymore. I think it died a long time ago. If you're watching this video, you're probably aware that there's a new RTS game in the works called Stormgate. I'm very much looking forward to Stormgate because I want to see it fix the problems that StarCraft had. I want it to be a game that is able to continually change and evolve and grow in a way that StarCraft wasn't. And I want it to have a monetization system that's sustainable, that I feel good about continually giving money to this game because of all the joy it keeps giving me, and hopefully that money can be used to fund the growth of the game into the future. I'm really hopeful that the developers of Stormgate understand all of the stuff about why StarCraft didn't work, and they can build something better in its place. I've been Auden Chu, that's my talk about StarCraft. If you like this video, go ahead and like it. Leave a comment if you want to argue with me about whether or not StarCraft is really a dead game or not. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more rants like it. And I also have a Patreon if you want to give me money and you want to see the behind the scenes cut of this video. I stutter a lot and I think out loud a lot, so maybe that will be cathartic for you. I hope you enjoyed watching this. Please subscribe if you want to see my upcoming videos. I release every Tuesday and Friday approximately. And I hope I see you in the next one. Catch you around. Bye-bye.